Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manhwa starts inside of a cave with a man panting, and panicking asking how he ended up in a situation like this. He starts by explaining how much he hates his father, and how he constantly hoped for his death. And today is the day it finally happened. He died from a heart attack. His father was a criminal, his father was a womanizer, and of course he was also extremely greedy. He was many things, but mostly trouble for the main character. But he did one thing good for him after dying. We see the man saying he's done cleaning up, and he wonders if his dad knew he was going to die soon. But he decides it doesn't matter anymore, and that he shouldn't care about it. He says with the morning sunlight beaming through his curtains, outside he can see workers heading to work, yet he can just stand here and relax while drinking his coffee. He starts to pog out saying he's in NEET, I'm sure everyone knows what it is. He says he didn't expect that his father would have a fortune he hidden away of around $3 million. He says his father was only great after his life. Now he can do whatever he wants, buy a house, a car, women, he's got a short list. But he's not interested in those things. The doorbell rings and he says it's here. Before the delivery man can say anything, the package is taken inside. The man dives onto his bed saying yay, and that he ordered stuff for his dream bedroom. He's made 3 vows to himself, to not work, to not have friends, and to never get married. He says work is the worst, and he knows it makes him a bad person, but he doesn't care. Having friends means a constant battle of trying to outdo one another. And then there's marriage, vowing to spend the rest of your time with someone you love. And we learn his cross-eyed father had married 12 times. And he doesn't want to repeat his father's mistakes. He just wants to play games while chilling in his bed. He says it's time to play the games he's beat piling up, and that he will 100% them all. 2 months later we see a finished screen, and he says that's dungeon attack done. His room is completely filthy now, and he wonders what game to play next, but gets a notification on the screen saying there's a new message. He's surprised since he never added anyone, and it's a message from the creators thanking him for playing. He says they must have put countless hours into this, and compliments their game. Then sees they are asking for him to take a survey. He's curious so he does it. It asks if he prefers cute girls or mature girls. He wonders why this question is relevant, and we don't see what he picks. Then it asks if he gets excited from hitting people, or being hit. He says geez, then as he keeps going through the survey he just gets bombarded with questions that don't pertain to the game. He says it's creepy and he doesn't want to do any more, and then the window asks if he knows how the world ends. He says of course since he completed the game. Then the window asks if he'd be able to change it. He gets even more creeped out. Then realizes what it is. Never mind, he says it's got to be a scam message, and soon it will ask him for money. He says he can't trust anything. We see a cockroach on his floor. But he sees it. Then starts to freak out about it. He hears a clicking sound, and it turns out he accidentally pressed the controller. He selects yes on accident, and his screen begins to glow, blinding him. He puts his hands over his eyes, and vanishes into thin air, leaving his musky room. Now he's back to panting again, and he wonders what happened while looking at his hands. He quickly realizes they aren't his, then he feels a sharp pain and falls to his knees. We hear a man saying to tell him where the treasure is. And if he doesn't answer they'll get serious. They mock him saying, "Oh demon lord." And the man says this is how his new awful life started. He wonders what treasure they are talking about, and why they called him the demon lord. He wonders if they actually meant him, and where he is. There are 10 dudes in the cave with him, and he really wonders what's going on. He says he was playing a game, but he can't remember exactly what. But he says now isn't the time for that. His whole body is in pain. We see his leg looks like a pretzel. I'm sure he'll walk it off. The pain is unbearable for him, but he reminds himself to lock in. He tells himself to think so he can find the best way out of the situation. He tells the men to wait. He asks why they keep calling him a demon lord. One of them grab his horn, asking if he's lost his mind, and calls him Demon Lord Dantalia. This clicks something within the man's head, and he remembers now. An RPG where the heroes go on a journey to defeat all the demon lords. Dungeon attack is what the game is called. Your goal is to save the world by ridding the world of them all. It's an insanely difficult game where you die, respawn, die, repeat. The ending of the game is the collapse of the world. And as for Dantalian, he is trash. Ranked 71st out of the 72 demon lords and he dies first. He realizes now that the world he is inside of is the game, and he's a weakling. He wonders how this is even possible, but quickly realizes how dear his situation is currently. The guy grabs his horn again, then punches him which sends him backwards. Dantalian slides across the ground. He says the situation is getting worse. The bandana man tells the rest that it's time, and they start to laugh and shout. Dantalian realizes he's about to be killed, and gets punched again. As they beat him, he monologues cursing his father, and says he just started to live a comfortable life, but now he's on the verge of death. His consciousness begins to fade, and he sees someone sitting at a table. As he gets closer he sees that it's his father, and he's laughing at him. His father words something to him, and Dantalian says he remembers something like this before. He explains that in the past he was kidnapped by people who held a grudge against his father. It was the 4th time he was kidnapped as a child, and the kidnapper wonders why he's so calm. It was because he reached his limit. He's taken to a warehouse and decides to bet it all. The kidnapper pulls a gun out, saying it's not a toy and he'll kill him. Dantalian says to shoot him then. He decides to make a bet since if the gun is real it's his win. He grabs onto the gun's trigger telling him to do it. If it's fake, it's his loss. He pulls the trigger, and nothing comes out. The kidnapper's hand shakes and he drops to the floor in fear, asking what the hell is wrong with him. In the end he turned himself in, and he lost his bet, but this allowed Dantalian to realize the one who survives in the end has the stronger resolve. He says it slipped his mind. Bandana Man says it's his last chance. He approaches him again, asking where the treasure is. Dantalian says he died once that day in the warehouse. He smirks and says he can shape this whole situation into what he wants. Bandana Man says he'll take his silence as his final words. Since he isn't a patient man to begin with, he calls forward a bald guy with a hammer, who asks if he's sure about this, asking how they'll find the treasure. Bandana Man says they'll find it themselves, just kill him already. Baldy starts to swing his hammer down saying he can regret it in the afterlife. As the attack gets closer to him, Dantalian says he'll tell him. The man stops his swing. Bandana Man is excited. Dantalian grits his teeth, and forces himself to stand up. With nothing but his determination to survive this, he says he will tell them, where the treasure truly is. Baldy laughs saying he finally gave up, and thinks how they can kill him after he hands the treasure over. Dantalian realizes he's screwed since he doesn't know where the treasure is, and he can't point in a random direction or else he'll die. He needs to quickly think of a plan. He kneels saying he's been defeated, and that the treasure is inside of the Demon Lord's chamber. However, it is hidden with magic. And the only person who can undo the magic is of course him. He looks up to gauge their reactions, and is greeted with a bright light that slashes down in front of him. It's Bandana Man's blade, and he warns him that if he is lying he will kill him on the spot. Dantalian says he understands. Bandana starts to hype his boys up, causing them to roar and cheer. Dantalian says somehow he's overcome the first obstacle. But it's just the start from here on. They can't kill him now since they need him, but that'll change in the chamber. So he needs to think of what's next. As they walk, Bandana tells him to walk faster. Dantalian apologizes. Bandana says to stop stalling. They keep walking, and Dantalian still hasn't cooked anything up. He says they are armed, so he doesn't know what to do. He looks around for something to use, and says since it's his castle surely there's still a monster around. Bandana tells him to keep moving, and thinks about how they'll finish him soon. Dantalian sees nothing but monster corpses, which makes him realize he cannot rely on others. He wonders how long they have until they reach the chambers. He says if only it was a real game. Then something clicks and he realizes something. He smiles while saying Eyes of Zeus. He says since it's the game world he can surely use this, and then we see a minimap appear with information on the area. So now he has an advantage, since he can use game skills. Of course Eyes of Zeus is a skill in the game, and it allows him to just see everything in the surrounding area. It's a high-level skill usually only obtained in the middle of the game, but there is one place it can be used early on in the game. Which of course is the tutorial dungeon that teaches adventurers the mechanics, Dantalian's castle, more like a cave. He says he spent too much time panicked, he didn't even think about this. He looks at the info, and sees how there are no troops alive. And plot convenience ensues, and a status window appears before his eyes saying there are no troops, so please hire some immediately. He's taken inside of some mind dimension, and it says contract with Hades. He can see all of the monsters available. He says he didn't know Dantalian would have an ability like this. Then he realizes he only has 100 Libra. He gets annoyed, asking what the hell he's been doing with his Libra, and how he can only afford 8 goblins. But there are 10 adventurers. He wonders if he can get a golem and launch a surprise attack, but realizes they are almost at the chamber. He begins to cook, while looking at all of the info, and finally comes up with some sort of plan. He says the odds are around 60%, but that's too low for him. But he says he has no time to think, he has to go with it. And that the adventurers need to prepare themselves. He says he has to gain their trust first, but before that there's something he needs to know. He uses another skill called Apostle of Aphrodite, I'll just call it Inspect. We see their stats appear above their heads. And he explains how the skill lets him see people's stats. He laughs saying he can see it all. Bandana turns around, and tells him to stop doing the stanky leg and walk faster. Dantalian apologizes again, he starts to smile like a villain. Saying the counterattack starts now. The inspection skill shows you even hidden statuses of the people around you. So he can utilize this to figure out which card to play. Bandana tells him again to keep walking, and of course threatens him again for the 40th time. Dantalian says alright, but keeps cooking. He says he needs to make Leaf, the bandana guy trusts him. Even if it means taking some risks, he will definitely succeed in taking them down. They keep walking through the cave, and Dantalian sees a dripped out skeleton. Saying first things first. He shouts telling everyone to wait, they are all confused and turn around. Leaf asks him what's going on. Dantalian says he's sorry for stopping them, but in the passage ahead is a trap. Leaf asks if he's serious. Dantalian says yes, and if they go any further there will be dozens of invisible arrows flying at them. And none of them will come out of it unscathed, so he will proceed on his own first, to disarm the trap for them. Leaf asks why he thinks they'd let him go. One of his men tells him that the path is very narrow, and too dark for them to see anything. Dantalian starts to walk down it. Leaf starts to yell at him, saying to stop trying to run away. But Dantalian continues saying he can't run if he wants to with his legs the way they are, and it's his way of showing respect. They are different from the previous adventurers since they didn't try to instantly kill him. He says if they don't believe him then just follow behind, but he cannot guarantee their safety. Leaf is surprised, and tells his guys not to be scared and follow him. But nobody else wants to do it, and they remind Leaf about the first trap they encountered, saying if they were careless they'd have died. Leaf gets annoyed, asking if they are even real men. And as they argue with one another Dantalian continues down the pathway. As he gets deeper he wonders if he's gone far enough, and he says please work. He grabs some of the arrows off the corpse from earlier, and brought them with him. This is where things will get started. He starts to grit his teeth, and says it isn't a big deal, then he raises the arrow and stabs himself with it. He screams out in pain. Loud enough that the adventurers can hear it. They ask if it was Dantalian screaming. Leaf yells asking what's going on. Dantalian says to just wait since the arrows are still coming. One of Leaf's men asks him what they should do, and Leaf says to get ready, and if they try to back out now he'll kill them. The adventurers look worried, but are too scared of Leaf to say no. They all begin to slowly walk forward. Leaf shouts asking where he is. They notice a blood trail, and start to follow it. As they keep going forward they find Dantalian on the floor, with an arrow in his thigh. They ask what happened, and he groans in pain. He leans up saying he must have passed out. Leaf asks him what happened with the trap. Dantalian tells him to be at ease, since he got rid of them. The adventurers are happy, and Leaf asks why help them, saying he could have just stayed quiet about the trap. Dantalian says he said it earlier, they are different from the other adventurers. They didn't try to kill him, and let him live. It moved him, and that's all there is to it. While he got hit by one, it shouldn't be that big of an issue. He pulls it out and says they can continue on. Leaf is starting to respect him more, and we see his likability increase towards Dantalian. Dantalian sees this, and then starts to get spammed with notifications as the rest of the adventurers also start to like him too. This is what he was waiting for. He says it's not enough, but it's a good start. Dantalian says they can keep going ahead. Leaf says he doesn't know what he was thinking, but he plans to use him. Leaf says that with his wound he'll just slow them down, so they have no choice. He tells one of the adventurers to lend him their shoulder. One of them instantly steps up and helps him. Dantalian thanks him, and Leaf starts to laugh saying this is their gratitude for clearing the path. And they can keep going forward. Dantalian says things are going well, but that Leaf is still not trusting him. But now it's time for him to continue performing in the second act of the one-man show. They finally reach the entrance to his castle. Leaf says it's more impressive than he thought. He opens it for the boys, and laughs saying they've finally made it. Then he tells Dantalian to show him where the treasure is. A teardrop hits the floor, as Dantalian starts to cry. They all wonder what's going on, and ask why he's crying. He says to forgive him, and he says it reminded him of his comrades, and his family. Leaf laughs, asking if demon lords have families. Dantalion says yes, and in the past even someone like him had those that he called a family. He says until that day when they suddenly appeared, we see him running down a hallway while some knights are chasing him. They ready their bows, then fire at him. The arrows fly at him, but land into something. He turns around to see an ogre asking if he's alright. He used himself as a meat shield. He tells Dantalion to run as fast as he can, and to leave it to him. Dantalion says no if he's leaving, then he has to go with him. The ogre gets stabbed with more arrows. Dantalion begins to cry more. The ogre says not to worry, just run quickly. As Dantalion's tears begin to pour out, it paints a story of him running away while the ogre holds them off. Dantalion tells Leaf and his men they all died protecting him. The adventurers all start to feel empathy, saying they are sorry to hear it. One of Leaf's men says he thought the demon lord would be purely evil, yet he can see him crying for his comrades. And that Dantalion doesn't seem evil to him. Due to his Oscar acting, the adventurers' likability all begin to shoot through the roof. Leaf says it's different than he's heard. He recalls a woman telling him that the demon lord is a scum who has no tears, or blood. He begins to like Dantalion more, but he starts to have a shit-eating grin saying he'll still use him as needed. Dantalion says everyone, thank you from the bottom of my heart for bringing me back to this castle. It's as he thought, they are all different from the ones who killed his family, and perhaps the dead may forgive them, but now the treasure here and his life all belong to them. It jumps a bit later. Dantalion tells them all they've arrived to his chambers, and as promised he will hand the treasures of the castle over to them all. Leaf laughs, asking where the treasure is. Dantalion says as he mentioned before it's concealed by magic, and he will now undo the magic, so please stand back. They say alright, and all back up to the entrance of the chamber, and ask if it's far enough. Dantalion says yes, and turns his back to them to hide his grin. He says it's going very well, and it's now time for the finishing touches. He already knows there's no treasure here based on his statuses. The only thing he has left is the 100 Libra. But if it's enough to fool them, it's perfect. He explains how in the world of Dungeon Attack 1 Libra is 15 silver coins. And that the game is set up in a way that the items and money you discard appear where you drop them. So he plans to use this to add into his trick. He gets ready to drop his Libra, then raises his hand into the air. He says he is the 71st Demon Lord who rules this land, and brave heroes in the name of Dantalion he will grant them treasure. They all watch his performance in anticipation, and it quickly turns into awe as coins begin to appear out of thin air over and over around the room. The adventurers begin to laugh, saying this has to be a dream. Leaf laughs too, as silver coins begin to rain onto them all. They quickly start to scoop the coins off the floor. Leaf still laughs, saying they got their hands on it, but the laugh turns maniacal, and his respect towards Dantalion jumps up by 50. He tells his men to divide the treasure equally. Leaf says they can use Dantalion more, and it'd be a waste to get rid of him now. Dantalion asks if he can say something to them all. Leaf asks if he has more to give them, and says to wait a minute for them to pick all this up first. His likability with them begins to rise higher and higher. He says he apologizes, but he must say this now. And that there are around 30 adventurers who have entered the dungeon. Leaf says huh, and everyone is surprised. Dantalion says he's used magic to inform him if anyone enters, but he didn't expect this. They start to panic, and Leaf says there's no way they can handle 30 people. He asks if there's another way out of the castle. Dantalion looks down, saying only the way they came in. One of them asks what'll happen if they attack this place, saying they'll clear this place out hella fast with that many people. They all start to shout and worry, but Leaf is speechless. Dantalion says he has an idea. If they cannot avoid them, then they should fight them. Leaf asks what he means. Dantalion asks if he has a map. Leaf says yes. Dantalion says his magic isn't enough to tell which route they'll take, but that he can act as a decoy. Leaf asks what he means. Dantalion says with how many people there are it must be a military division, and they probably used magic so they can surely sense where he is and chase him, and there are 3 routes they can use to get to the exit from here. So if they take a different route from him and run outside they can escape. Leaf starts to think about how he's willing to sacrifice himself, but asks him if he is planning to just run away and is bluffing about the intruders. Dantalion says no, he would never do that, he just wants to help. But there is no time for him to convince him. He whispers something into Leaf's ear that isn't audible to us, but Leaf smiles saying he understands. And that they'll go with his strategy, but not to tell the rest since it'll upset them. Leaf yells, saying to stop worrying, just grab the treasure and group up. Dantalian says he knew that Leaf wouldn't believe him, but it's still working as intended. We see the adventurers helping Dantalian out of the cave, and they say Leaf sure is bold for this plan. Dantalian kindly flashbacks us to after they gather the treasure. He told them they are going to split into groups and head for the exit. They ask if he's serious, saying it doesn't make any sense. Leaf tells them to shut up and turns into Nickelback, saying look at this photograph, there are 3 routes leading to the exit. And they'll probably only take one route, and with how many there are they would be no match, so they just need to take their chances at survival. They all look worried, and he tells them there's a 100% chance at least one side survives, and if they are lucky both groups will make it out. He says he'll be taking the treasure with them. They bark at him and he tells them he's not going to keep the treasure to himself. One group will be going with Dantalian, but it's a blessing since if they survive they can use his bounty and become heroes. And it's worse on the side with all of the money, they are still worried. And he says to show some guts, asking if they want to die like dogs. He asks about their families back in the village, asking if they'll keep being cowards. He says he knows them better than that, and he wants everyone to survive this. They all start to get hyped up. We see Leaf's group, and he's happy that they were dumb enough to listen to him. He thought it would fail, then recalls his conversation with Dantalian, and how he whispered saying he can send some of his men with him to see if he's running away or not, and he can just make up some reason to keep all the treasure to himself. Since if what he says is true then some of them will be sacrificed with him and he'll have to split the treasure with less people anyways. Even if he's lying there's no way for him to escape, so it's a win for Leaf. Leaf goes back to laughing saying in the end he'll come out on top from this all. Dantalian of course had read up to this point, saying it's perfect like he planned, and now it's time to do it. He looks at the monster summoning menu, and decides it's time to finally kill them all. The cave begins to shake violently and the adventurers begin to wonder if it's an invader's attack. The ground continues to shake violently, a strong gust of wind starts to blow by them, blowing out their torches. They drop them, and ask Dantalian what's going on here. Dantalian covers one of their mouths, saying it's better not to make a sound, unless they want to suffer more. He unsheathes the man's sword, saying he's indebted to him. Then starts to gut him like a fish, while the rest are distracted with what's in front of them. They see a purple magic circle. It starts to pull rocks on the side of the cave and form it into a monster, which of course we know it's a golem. It roars at the adventurers, causing them to feel fear and possible hunger. It causes some of the ceiling to start to fall onto them. One of them shout to run, and the rocks start to land around them causing a dust cloud to form. As it fades one of the men sees his friends have been crushed under the rocks. Then he notices it's got one of them in its hand, and he bravely rushes in and attacks the golem. But his sword just breaks into multiple pieces, and he's surprised since he genuinely thought it would somehow work. It's already crushed his friend, and goes to swing at the man. He sees this, but realizes it's too late and gets turned into a meat crayon. The final adventurer sees this, but is too scared to move at all, and is speechless. Then he realizes Dantalian is behind him, asking him what's going on, saying they need to run. But we hear him get stabbed, and we see Dantalian has shoved his blade through the man's chest. The man asks why, and falls to the floor. Dantalian says it's obvious, after all he is a demon lord. At Leaf's side they wonder what the earthquake was, asking if a battle started with the other group. He says it looks like Dantalian was telling the truth, and he did a good job. But he quickly realizes how wrong he was, as they see Dantalian standing before them. Leaf asks why he's here, as Dantalian gives him the good old WWE stare down. He says it looks like he didn't run into the intruders. Then asks where the rest are. Dantalian pulls out the blade saying his friends are all dead, every single one of them. Leaf says this isn't funny and to stop fooling around. Dantalian asks if he cannot accept reality, saying it's just as he's thinking right now. He's killed them all. Leaf tells him to say it again. Dantalian laughs, saying they were all idiots. He should have seen their faces when they died. Leaf starts to get pissed, and realizes they were fooled from the start. His likability with them all instantly turns into hate. He says they are dumber than monkeys, and that makes him grateful. He wants them to get angry, so he starts to laugh like he's insane, asking if he really thought a demon lord would be on their side. Leaf starts to unleash all of his anger, shouting as loud as he can, and they all brandish their weapons while running at him. As they get closer and closer we see glowing eyes behind Dantalian, then the golem appears and punches at the group. One of the men is instantly killed from the shockwave, while another is crushed into the wall. The survivors begin to scream, and the golem backhands toward them. One of them tries to block it for some reason, and turns into a packet of ketchup that was stepped on. Leaf is still alive, and watches as Baldy goes for an attack on the golem's head. He hits it, smashing the golem into pieces. He looks over at Leaf saying he's done it. But Leaf's expression is still fearful, as we see Dantalion stab Baldy in the back. Dantalion thanks Leaf, saying it was all due to him. Leaf then sees the golem begins to form again. Leaf's sweat turns cold. Dantalion tells him that killing a golem is easy, you just need to destroy the core in its chest, but you need the knowledge and experience. But if they stayed calm and worked together without being tilted, they could have won, but now the power dynamic has changed. He asks Leaf what he's going to do. Leaf realizes he's entirely different than before, and that this is the real Demon Lord Dantalion. He starts to panic, but tells himself it can't end like this. He says he's been in this situation many times before. No matter what Dantalion pulls, he can handle it. Leaf drops his weapon, saying he's lost, and says to kill him. Dantalion says he understands, and starts to approach Leaf. Leaf laughs in his head, saying just a little bit more. Asking who would be killed by him. We see him hiding a dagger behind his back. Dantalion looks at the monster menu, and looks down it, but keeps walking forward. Leaf starts to get antsy, saying it's almost time, and begins to count the steps down. Saying he'll kill him in a few more steps, but Dantalion stops moving. And says, Leaf, I can see right through you and everything you're up to. Of course we know he can read his thoughts with inspection. He starts to laugh in his face while pointing the blade at him. Saying it's checkmate for him, Leaf starts to sweat profusely. Saying how dare you mock me, and that it isn't over yet. He pulls out his dagger and leaps at Dantalion. He says he's going to be the one to die here. He quickly loses his momentum and falls to the floor. He faceplants, then looks down at his leg to see a slime attached to it. He asks where it came from, then looks back in front to see Dantalion getting closer. He raises his sword at him, but the golem grabs onto his arm. All we're left with is a crushing sound and Leaf screams echoing throughout the chamber. Dantalion says it went exactly like he thought, and he can't believe it went so well. He laughs, asking Leaf how it feels to have his pride and everything else crushed by someone who he thought was weaker than himself. How does it feel being killed by someone who he found inferior? Leaf screams in complete terror. Leaf asks himself where did he go wrong? He wonders if it wasn't killing Dantalion earlier, or if it was when he got the map from that woman. No, it was from the very beginning when he challenged a demon lord. He realizes now, he could never win against him. As a demon lord is a truly terrifying existence. It cuts in Dantalion having no idea where he is inside of smoke. He sees his father's face, saying to harden himself. His father taunts him, saying no matter what choice he makes his life will be worse. Dantalion swings his hand calling him noisy, and says to get lost. But all he hears is the echoes of his father laughing at him. Then we hear a woman's voice saying my lord. He opens his eyes, and says she sees that he is awake. He quickly sits up, asking what she is doing. She says forgive me, but it didn't seem like he was waking up. Then she pulls out a paper saying she won't beat around the bush. And that the 100 libra she loaned him 2 months ago, plus the interest of 96 libra. So 196 total. She wants him to repay her right now. Dantalion wonders what the hell is her deal. Finally he says let me explain, and jumps back to 3 weeks ago. After killing Leaf he fell to the floor, right under his golem. He sighs, saying it's finally over. Then he sees another window appear, that says tutorial completed, and his level has gone up, along with some of his skills. It still says he is 100 libra for some reason. But then now has the option to pick a skill now, and since the tutorial is over he can only choose one of the skills. And the skill will be downgraded to level 1. Then he realizes that this means this is actually the real start. He wonders if he's going to have to continue living as Dantalion. He says as the way things are now, there's no guarantee he can return to his world. So he needs to choose the one skill wisely. He looks at it while thinking about which one suits him the best, then picks Apostle of Aphrodite, or what we call inspection. Some may think of it as simple mind reading, but being able to see the stats too is very useful. He picks it and starts to sweat like crazy. He begins to pant while saying he's tired, saying it feels like he's been up for a long time. He tells the golem to keep him safe, as he wants to sleep now. When he woke up he was in a bed, and the room was destroyed. He thinks the golem brought him here. He really hoped it was just a dream, but he is still inside of Dantalion's body, and he has his memory fully intact too. He resolves himself that now he'll have to actually live as a demon lord. Then the woman from earlier appears in his room. He turns around to see her, and says her gaze is like that of ice, and her name is lapis lazuli, Lala for short. It jumps to him in his throne, and he says like he said. The one who borrowed money from her isn't him. She glares at him, saying okay, but she doesn't understand. 2 months ago it was definitely him who borrowed money from her, and the Chamber of Commerce. She pulls out the note from before, saying this is the proof. He starts to sweat, saying that it isn't working, and they've been going back and forth for a whole week. He just finished dealing with the adventurers, now he has to deal with debt collectors. He wonders why he has to clean this mess up, and he calls Dantalian an idiot. Then says Lala is just as dumb, for lending money to someone like him. He realizes something, then says he has a question. She asks what, and he says if the money cannot be paid back then what happens. She says in that case he has to declare bankruptcy. He asks what happens if he does that. She says the Chamber of Commerce will take ownership of the Demon Lord's castle. She says they will be making a few requests of him, and he doesn't need to think, but simply do as he is told. He says okay, last question, then asks what day it is. She is confused, and he begins to release a menacing aura. She says that she doesn't understand. He asks her again what day, month and year it is. She says to forgive her rudeness, but it's April 17, 1505. He realizes it's already past the repayment date, and if the interest continues to pile up he'll go bankrupt. He starts to laugh, saying he understands. He then tells Lala that he has a proposal for her, and that he wants her to lend him another 10,000 libra. It jumps 3 days later to a group called the Kunkuska firm's headquarters. A goblin is hauling absolute cheeks. His name is Torkel, and he's managing to order people around while running. He looks at the time and sees he is late, and wonders what is going on for there to be an emergency meeting. He opens the door, saying sorry for the holdup. And at a table we see a man saying Torkel is late, and for merchants time is money. So take a seat already, they've wasted enough time. The man says it's time to start the meeting now. We learn that the Kunkuska firm is where the 5th ranked demon lord Malbus, and the 9th ranked Paimon both are. It is the best company in the demon world. And the one in charge of it is named Ivar Lodbrok, and he is one of the 3 ancient vampire left. Ivar tells everyone that Lala will explain why they are all here. She appears behind him. And the other demons start to make faces of disgust, because she's a hybrid of a succubus and a human. And ask what such filth is doing here. Ivar shouts, telling them all to shut up. Lorkel is visibly scared. Ivar tells Lala to explain it, and she says that Dantalian has requested for another loan. Torkel is angry they've been summoned for something like this. And he calls Lala a mongrel girl, asking if they are serious about this meeting. Ivar says to calm down, and tells Lala to explain how much he asked for. She informs them that he requested 10,000. Everyone is really surprised. Torkel says that amount is the budget for a small country. He stands up, albeit only 2 feet, asking if he really requested so much. Lala says yes he did. She flashbacks us to when he asked. She asks him to repeat what he said. He asks if she wasn't listening, and he wants to borrow an additional 10,000. She asks what he means, saying he already has a debt of 196. He says this is why he wants to borrow more. Lala says that she doesn't understand. He asks why she lent him money in the first place, when he is regarded as incompetent by everyone else. She thinks of an answer, then says no, and that isn't right. He laughs, saying that it's all right, and she didn't think he'd be able to pay it back in the first place. They wanted him to go bankrupt, so he would turn into the firm's lapdog. He approaches her, and says those were her true intentions, or is he wrong? She starts to sweat, saying that isn't the case. He says he has another question. He says she came here under direct orders to lend him money and get closer to him, right? She says no, and it was all done by herself. He laughs, asking if that's so, and finds it funny she said it so quickly. He says is that she should lend him the money since it means for the rest of his life he would have to live being their dog. They would be giving him 10,000 libra, now it doesn't sound like a bad deal, right? She is completely speechless. If she got a demon lord to be their dog she would surely be promoted. He lifts her head, saying how about it, asking if she will go along with it. She grabs his hand, then pulls it away from her face, saying understood. Flashback ends. Torkel asks why they would give him 10,000 when he cannot even pay back 100. Ivar says that's a good point, and asks Lala to tell him more. She says bet, and recalls what Dantalian said. She says that he's claiming there is a plague that will be coming to the world, and that he would make a cure for it, and for the sake of a loved one. Torkel asks what that means, and Lala says that means her since she is his mistress after all. Everyone in the meeting says Ayo, what are you talking about? She tells them she did it all by herself. They get mad that a hybrid like her got close to a demon lord, and say to get the whore out of here. Ivar says all of this just to get them a dog, and starts to laugh loudly, enough to shake the room. He says it's wonderful. He says how about that, this hybrid has not only made him a part of the largest company in the demon world, but she even defied her own fate of being trash, and has now become the demon lord's mistress. He laughs saying if this isn't a masterpiece he doesn't know what is. He says the firm is a meritocracy, and normally he'd not lend money to Dantalian. But this will be a special case, and he tells Lala to return to the castle and relay this to him. He will give him the 10,000 libra he wants so badly. A week or so later we're introduced to the city of merchants, curious. We hear a merchant asking Lala to repeat what she said. She holds up an herb saying to collect every one of these on the continent. The merchant asks if she's seriously going to hire so many people just to get one herb, especially since it's just a weed. Lala tells him it doesn't concern him, and these are Dantalian's instructions, so get it done quickly. As she walks down the street we can see multiple lecherous eyes staring at her, and some even mock her, but enough of that because guess what, another time skip. This time a month later at Dantalian's castle. Lala approaches him while he's reading a book, and informs him that she's successfully secured the herbs, and put them in a storage facility with guards. He says she did a good job, then she asks him what he's planning on doing. She says he claimed there'd be an epidemic, and that's why he wanted to borrow so much money, but now she's used 80% of it buying worthless herbs. He laughs telling her to give it a guess. She says that she has no idea. He says oh well, then congratulates her on a job well done. Then says they should have a toast. She says no, and asks why she would. He asks if she is really going to refuse. She apologizes, and he says he's just kidding so don't make that face. Then makes the toast anyway saying cheers to their future. She puts the glass to her lips and drinks it. Then is surprised, and asks him what it is. He starts to laugh at her, saying it's from the herb he had her gather, and it's delicious right? She instantly turns serious, asking if he's kidding. He says no, and in order to secure the 10,000 libras she surely told the firm he's gone crazy, and wanted to make a cure. So surely it all makes sense now, she's just as confused as we are. He then asks her for the date and she tells him it's June, asking why he wants to know that. He says he sees, and that it's about time. He pulls his ye old pen out and starts to write, saying Lala won't need to come around for a while, and he wants her to go to this place and observe it for a while. She looks at the paper and says his handwriting blows, and asks why he wants her there. He laughs saying to go and she'll understand. He says he knows she has a lot to deal with, and she should go relax. A few days later at a bathhouse we see her undressing. She says she really doesn't understand him, or what he was thinking. She passes through some curtains, and wonder why he sent her here, or what could even be here. She sits down in the water, and recalls the note and it mentioning the symptoms for the plague. She starts to blow bubbles saying there's no way he'll be right. But she says she feels uneasy, then plot convenience ensues. She hears a scream, and runs over asking what happened. We see a girl saying this child just collapsed. We see the girl is panting and has a fever. Lala asks her what's wrong and tries talking to her. The girl says it hurts and Lala asks where. She says her whole body is in pain. Lala touches her forehead saying she's burning up. So she'll take her to the clinic. Then she notices a black bruise on the girl's neck, and how it's exactly like Dantalian's note. She is shocked, then hears another scream and women all over the bathhouse start to collapse. It jumps to the clinic. We see black bruises and a nurse says if the patient is still alive they need to rest. Lala sits there listening to all of this, and starts to worry saying it's impossible, and there's no way. A man approaches her asking if she is feeling okay. Since everyone in the bathhouse is dead except for her, he tells her it'd be best if she leaves the town. She looks down wondering why she's fine, then recalls drinking the drink from Dantalian, and how he said it was from the herb he made her gather. She says she doesn't want to admit it, but it is really true. He indeed predicted a plague. Another time skip, this time a few weeks. We see a fairy's wings fluttering, as she's carrying a letter. She gets to Torkel's room, and apologizes for bothering him. He yells at her saying he's meeting with Lady Paimon. Paimon says it's fine, and that it must be quite important, and says he shouldn't worry. We're finally introduced to another demon lord. She is ranked 9th. Torkel apologizes to her. He asks the fairy what is going on. She says she has an urgent message from headquarters. He opens it hoping that it isn't serious, then turns pale like he saw a ghost. As the message says, an epidemic has broken out, and its mortality rate is 80%. Iman sees his expression, asking what's going on. He stutters, saying no. The letter says that Dantalian has created a cure, but monopolized all of the herbs, and his value is over 3 million. Iman asks to see it, and he quickly hands it to her. She chuckles while reading it, and Torkel asks if everything is okay. She stands up, saying that this is very interesting. It cuts to lightning in the sky, and Dantalian inside of a window. He says a storm is brewing, which of course is a metaphor. The doors open in his room and he says that she's back faster than he expected, and asks if she was able to relax, and of course it's Lala. He says she looks pale, and says he thought hot springs were her thing. She says he knew from the beginning. He asks what she means. And she says to stop playing dumb, and an epidemic started in Syracuse. What's more, the herbs he had her collect can be used to make a cure. He says he has no clue what she's talking about, then starts to laugh as the thunder roars, saying he said so from the beginning. She's surprised, and Dantalian says of course he'd have known. In the game Dungeon Attack the story starts in 1515. Which is after the plague had already spread and wreaked havoc on the world. The plague started 10 years earlier in a bathhouse in Syracuse. And it took a whole year for them to find the black herb. Everyone treated the herb like trash. He of course entered during the year of the epidemic, so decided to abuse it. He got the idea as soon as he saw the note from the firm that Lala brought, so it's all thanks to her this was possible. He asks her what the firm thinks, and she says that they are in turmoil and called an emergency meeting. He says he understands, but why is she not at the firm? Why did she come here instead? He says, let me guess, she's thinking that going back to the firm would put her in danger. And he knows they'll think it's impossible to predict a plague, so someone must have intentionally spread it. So who did it, and why? The only answer they'd come up with is that it's Lala. Seducing the demon lord, telling the firm that she'd make him their lapdog, then by chance being in the place the plague started. Along with buying thousands and thousands of the special herb. All of it points that she must be the mastermind behind it all. And she's aware of this herself, which is why she's here and not the firm. She starts to back up afraid, and gives up some backstory on how she's always been treated poorly for being a hybrid, and she worked so hard to get to where she is to prove a point. Up until now everything has been easy. She wonders who Dantalian is, saying he's not remotely the same as when she met him before. And questions whether he is the same demon lord she's known until now or not. Dantalian says she has one choice left, to kneel and become his servant. If she does so he will grant her real power. By putting her in charge of all transactions regarding the cure. She is completely taken aback. And he says that it will ravage the world, and most people will die. The plague does not discriminate. Even those who despise her for being a crossbreed will desperately look for ways to survive, so many of them want to do business with her. A hybrid who's always discriminated against will control the fate of hundreds of thousands of lives. He asks what she will do. She tells herself not to do it, and that she can't take his hand. But her heart is pounding so fast, she is left speechless. Then smirks, saying understood. She kneels to him, saying that her life now belonged to him, and she kisses his hand. It is important for the oath, but it never mentions it. He says since she's giving him everything, he will do the same for her too, and grant her the greatest view. It jumps to some food, and she's pushing it on a cart. She's thinking about the oath she just made, and how it's been a week since then. She tells Dantalian she's brought his meal, but he doesn't answer. So she opens the door, and sees that he's drank himself to sleep again. She explains how all he does is read, drink and sleep, and she really has no idea what's going on inside of his head. We finally get to learn what he was like half a year ago, when she approached him for her own goals. She says she's here for the firm, and goes to introduce herself. He tells her to shut up, because he couldn't care less about the name of a filthy mongrel, and he's busy. She says he was a complete scumbag, who instantly jumped at the sight of money. Then she started to tell adventurers like Leaf, that there was treasure inside of the castle. She wanted him to experience hardship so he would come crying to her, but he surpassed her imagination entirely. Now he holds the lives of more than half of the continent, yet he's able to sleep so peacefully. They've already received letters from several countries regarding the sale of medicine. And so far the firm has been quiet about all of this. On cue it cuts to Torkel asking Ivar if he's inside his room. He tells Torkel to enter, and we see it's full of weird shit. Ivar tells him to take a seat, then asks him what the situation is. Torkel says it can't be worse. The plague is spreading rapidly and it's just a matter of time until it's all over the continent. Ivar says according to their analysis 30% of the population is going to die. Torkel says surely he's joking. Ivar asks if he's ever told a joke. Bro is allergic to fun. All lords have also suspended trading with the firm today. Torkel is surprised, then hits the table out of anger. He says it's all because of that mongrel, then asks what happened to her. Ivar says they haven't been able to contact her, so it's safe to assume she's betraying the firm. Since according to the report Lala was there when the plague started, and she's buying up all the herbs that could be used for a cure. He laughs, saying it wasn't them simply predicting a plague, and that it was created instead. Torkel says that means someone intentionally did it, he's not the brightest. Ivar says exactly, so who would be the mastermind of this? It of course can't be Lala since she shouldn't have the power to do this. Torkel asks if it's Dantalian then. Ivar says no, since he isn't capable either. If he was he'd never have ended up in debt. So both he and Lala are both being used as pawns. Torkel asks who would be able to create and spread a disease. Ivar says he knows one person who is capable of that. Torkel starts to shake, asking if he means who he thinks it is. Ivar says yes, he is the only one capable of this, the god of black magic and disease, the 8th-ranking demon lord Barbatos. Torkel says it's true that Barbatos would be capable, they've always hated humans and has started many wars. And if the plague spreads, the damage done to the humans will be much greater than the damage done to the demons. If things go really wrong, humans might go extinct. Ivar chuckles, saying this is a demon lord's true nature. Torkel says if Barbatos is behind, then what will he do, since the firm has maintained good relationships with numerous demon lords. So if he's planning to take a demon lord on, he would need to present strong evidence. Ivar says they have that. Lala and Dantalian will tell them everything they need. He already has something planned, and will make them regret standing up to him. Torkel is shocked, then a woman enters the room calling for Ivar. He laughs, saying she's already here. He opens the letter and begins to laugh after reading whatever was inside of it. He tells Torkel to go to Paimon and tell her what they know. Since the only one who can go up against Barbatos is Paimon. Torkel says he understands. Since Paimon and Barbatos are on bad terms, she would cooperate to stop them. Ivar laughs, saying those brats dare to stand him up. He vanishes from his chair and says that he cannot wait. He flies behind the girl who brought the note, and bites her neck, saying he'll add Lala to his living doll collection. It jumps back to Lala telling Dantalian to wake up, and that it's urgent. He asks her what it is. She tells him they've received summons. He's surprised, and so is she, since there's never been one so suddenly. It's a meeting for all of the demon lords. A Walpurgis night will be held. It jumps to the sound of festival music, and some girls are singing. They look like witches. They start to talk about Dantalian being their next client, and how he fell in love with a higher bid. One of them says how romantic, and she's sure he's a gentleman. Another girl says they should stop prying on his life, and that they are almost there. It cuts back to Lala telling Dantalian to hurry. She calls out to him again. He tells her to shut up. He asks why he even has to go. And what the hell even is a Walpurgis night? She asks how a demon lord couldn't know what it is. She then asks if he's even participated in one before. He says nope. She says okay then. A Walpurgis night is where all of the demon lords and their followers gather. Together they address issues that go beyond national borders so they can maintain order in the world. There are no schedules for when they are held, and nearly all lords attend. He says that's even more reason to not go. She stares at him like seriously. Then says the topic this time is the plague, and the location is in Niflheim, which is where the firm's headquarters is located. So the ones who probably initiated this was the firm, and he has a monopoly for the cure, so if he doesn't attend, they'll come up with a reason to crush them. Dantalian wonders why it's one problem after another, but it's true that it would be bad if they use force against them. He says alright then, and they should attend it. He says if it's a place for discussion, then surely they'll come up with a resolution, and worst case he has Lala. This is all why he spent so much money. He then asks her how they'll get to Niflheim. He says it's better for the firm if he doesn't attend, so surely they'll plan something to do to him on their way. She says yes, which is why she made the proper arrangements. They should be here any minute. Then we hear the music from earlier, as witches pull up singing a song and flying on their broomsticks. Dantalian looks up in complete shock. We get a better look at one of the witches, then they all land on the ground. They thank him for using their service, saying they are here to escort Dantalian on his journey, and that they are called the Burberry sisters. He's a little freaked out, and tells Lala they are all kids, so will they be okay? She says he shouldn't judge a book by its cover, and once witches make a contract with demon lords they stop growing. The fact they all look so young is proof they are talented. He says he understands. Lala says they are probably 200 years older than she is. He says my fault, then coughs saying he was rude. He tells them to raise their heads, and he'd like to sincerely thank them for accepting his request, and they'll be in his care. They all start to blush, and Lala stares them down. Dantalian asks her what's wrong. She says it's nothing. One of the sisters says it's time to depart, and domes some magic girl symbol and a chair appears on a broom. She tells him to get aboard. He's sketched out. They start flying and she says attention please, thanks again for choosing the Burberry sisters. Then they start to jam out again as they ride to the meeting. We see a statue at night, and are inside of Niflheim, specifically the Hermes Square. We see a lot of people, then one of the sisters saying it must have been tough sitting for 6 hours. And she hopes he's holding up okay. He says it must have been difficult for them too. And asks if they'd like to join them for dinner as their way of saying, thanks. They seem really excited, saying they would be honored. And that they actually know of a good place. He tells her to lead the way, and Lala asks what he's doing. He says he's tired and would like to drink. She still looks very serious and he asks her if she thinks the firm will do something. He tells her not to worry, saying they aren't dumb enough to try it in the city. She is still hesitant, but says okay. As they follow the Burberry sisters, we hear everyone having a good time. Dantalian and them walk down the street, and she says they are almost there. Then they hear a man screaming. Dantalian turns around to see a man being violently kicked. The man says the alcohol and service is ass here, asking why he's bothering to try and make a living. He should just disappear instead. The man being kicked apologizes. Dantalian calls to Lala, and asks her who the trash in front of him is. She says that's the 72nd ranked demon lord, Andromalius. He's ranked even lower than Dantalian. He says he's been wondering what he was like, and he sees now. He takes a sip of a random dude's drink, then raises it into the air. Lala asks what he's doing, then he drops the glass saying he thinks this trip will be more fun than he expected. We get more backstory about the game. When the protagonist was a child, his village was destroyed by a demon lord, and years later he grew up as a hero with the goal to defeat all of the demon lords. The story follows him and his companions traveling the world, and it's 10 years before the start of the game. And the one who destroyed the protagonist's village and made him grow up to be a hero, is none other than Andromalius. Which of course is the one beating up the guy on the street. Dantalian laughs in his head, saying he still has time before he attacks the village. We hear him just mauling really hard. He then hears the glass break and turns around to see Dantalian. He starts to glare him down, asking what's he's looking at. Dantalian smirks, and this makes Andro pissed, so he starts walking towards him asking what the hell he is smiling about. Dantalian asks Lala if Andro has any forces protecting him. She says not that she is aware of, and he spends most of his time at the casino, and just uses his position as demon lord to torment people. Even among demon lords he is considered straight trash. Dantalian says he sees. As Andro gets closer he wonders what's up with his outfit. He sees Lala and realizes that this must be who everyone is talking about. Lala tells Dantalian not to do anything rash, since conflicts between demon lords have a lot of complications. He asks if she means the common law. She says yes, and that a demon lord is above a noble, and since there are only 72 of them they use common law rather than codified law, so they can ensure order. And surely he knows that common law forbids demon lords from fighting one another, so should his emotions get the best of him and they fought, he would be punished. He says he sees, and when they square up we see Andro is much bigger than he is. And he asks him who the hell he is. Dantalian barks back saying it doesn't matter who he is, seeing him act so high and mighty is making him sick, so get out of his sight. Andro asks if he wants to die, and he replies that he would like to see him try. Andro gets ready to punch him. Lala sees this and starts to run it to stop it, but Dantalian puts his hand out so she doesn't interfere. He says this is good, and now all he needs is to be hit. Andro stops his fist right in front of his face, and Dantalian looks annoyed. Andro starts to laugh saying he's been hearing rumors about someone of noble birth mingling with the common folk, and with mongrels. He says he didn't expect such an idiot to take one as a lover, and he didn't think he'd encounter that idiot right here, right Dantalian? Dantalian is surprised that he isn't a complete idiot, and says so what? Andro laughs saying that was close, and he almost broke the law. And that they are forbidden from attacking each other. If he didn't realize he was Dantalian, he'd have fallen for it. The blatant provocation. He wanted to be hit and he really thought that he would fall for it. But too bad for him that he didn't. Dantalian is silent. Andro says he'll be leaving now. Then he spots Lala asking if she's the mongrel who enticed a demon lord. He says she's easy on the eyes, but she reeks of being lower class. He touches her breast asking how she got that idiot to fall for her. Then touches her stomach saying he'd like to try her out at least once. She tells him to stop, and he makes an ugly ass face. Then he turns to Dantalian saying that the common law only applies between demon lords, so he can beat Lala up. He rears his fist back, then hits her straight in the face, causing her to fall over. Everyone around is shocked, and Andro says he can attack anyone that isn't a demon lord and be fine. He begins to laugh maniacally saying he'll beat her up, use her, then return her to him. Even if she's filthy he'll take good care of her. God, I hate him. Dantalian still just stands there, but looks ready. Andro looks around asking if everyone is looking. He says he doesn't care if it's a woman or child, equal rights, equal lefts, and they should all bow down and kneel before him. He asks if they want to end up like this mongrel. Everyone looks too afraid to say anything, and he laughs again, and looks at Lala on the ground. Then starts stomping her out while yelling. She screams out in pain and he says this feels great. Dantalian still says nothing, and Andro asks how he's feeling now, since his mistress being beaten up right in front of him, and he cannot do anything about it. He laughs loudly again, telling everyone to say his name, as he's the one who stands atop the world. And he says his name out again, I really hate him. Then Dantalian starts to laugh. Andro stops monologuing and asks him what's so funny. Dantalian says nothing, he's just been talking so arrogantly, yet he wonders how many people here will actually follow him. Andro asks what kind of sore loser question is that, saying if they don't follow him he'll just force them to. Dantalian smirks, asking if there's anyone he has ever overpowered by force. He asks what he's talking about, then he looks over to see Lala standing up, and she seems completely fine. Andro gets pissed, saying he should have just sat there and enjoyed the show, and says he wants to die. Lala looks at him, and Andro asks her what she's glaring at, then backhands her calling her a filthy mongrel. He then notices that she didn't fall down, and glares at him again. He tells her not to get cocky, then smacks her again, saying she needs to kneel. He just continues beating her while everyone watches, asking who she thinks he is. Dantalian is still smirking, and he explains that Lala has lived in the slums since she was a child. So she's used to being beaten, and Andro's fist won't hurt her. He continues just comboing the piss out of her, and he says he's the king of this world. Dantalian says sorry, and grabs a knife saying he'll be borrowing this. Lala is still standing from Andro's blows, and he wonders how the hell she is still standing, and he hates the way she keeps glaring at him. He starts to mental boom and decides that he's just going to kill her right here and now. Dantalian calls out to him, and then Andro looks over, but it's too late. He gets sliced across his face, specifically across the eyes. Everyone else watching is worried. Andro lets out a blood-curdling scream and falls to his knees screaming about his eyes. Dantalian says he doesn't need his eyes if he cannot see the strength of a person he's picking a fight with. Lala asks what he's doing, asking if he knows what he's done. He wraps his arm around her, and pulls her close saying that she did well. He hugs her, and thanks her, from the bottom of his heart. He tells her to hold her left hand out. He says he wanted to give this to her on a more fitting occasion, but she's shining more beautifully than anyone else. She is in awe as he puts a ring on her finger. She asks about it, and he tells her not to say anything for now, and just to watch. He raises her hand, saying people of Niflheim. He introduces himself as the 71st ranked demon lord. And the person next to him is the person that he loves, while they may be from different status, and even if it's forbidden for them to be together, he is in love with her. And this man here hurt the person he loves. He asks them if such injustice could be forgiven, and that he cannot forgive this even if he is a demon lord. They are surprised that he actually broke the common law for the sake of his lover. He tells Lala to step back and watch, as this is where it gets interesting. He says they are all subject to an unreasonable demon lord, asking how long they'll just submit to him. He asks if they are truly okay with this, and if justice exists in this world, then surely Andro deserves to face judgment. Andro struggles to speak, saying to shut up and listen. He says talking about judgment, when they are only one rank apart, he's just a small fry getting carried away. He violated the common law by attacking him. He laughs all evil like again saying that Dantalian will be the one to be judged. He says they need to get him since he's violated the law, and if they don't he will kill all of them. He says that Dantalian has no right to judge him. Dantalian laughs, saying oh Andro, stop being so arrogant, and he's got it all wrong. Andro asks what he means, then Dantalian says to everyone, In the name of the demon lords he shall pass judgment onto this man. He will leave the verdict to the people, so they can decide. Everyone watching is speechless. He says the reason the demon lords are able to survive right now is because of the people. However, Andro was simply born a demon lord. He doesn't understand what power truly is. What's more, instead of fulfilling his duties as a demon lord, he spends his time drinking and gambling, and raises his hands against the weak. He asks them what kind of demon lord is that. He doesn't behave like one at all. The world doesn't exist for someone like him. The world exists for the people. For this land, and for their future. He asks if a man like this truly deserves to live, and now is the time for the true heroes of Niflheim to step up. Andro tells him to shut up, and asks if they didn't hear him. He tells them to hurry and capture him, calling them all useless. Dantalion asks why he's panicking, saying he's so desperate. He says it's because he already knows, it's due to the small injury he gave him. He's afraid since he cannot see them. Andro tells him to shut up over and over. Dantalion says this means if someone were to kill him he wouldn't know who did it. Andro yells louder saying to shut up, and goes on like a broken record. Then is stabbed in the back. He asks who it is and turns around to see, but of course he cannot see anything with how his eyes are. Dantalion puts a hand on his shoulder, saying everything until now has been according to his plan. And he is his thanks. Andro asks him what he means, then begins to hear the villagers' footsteps getting closer, and he starts to tell them all to kill Dantalion already. They quickly get behind him, and he realizes. He tells them to stop, saying they need to think it through. Dantalion goes back to Lala and the Burberry sisters, and says he reaps what he sows. And it's a classic case of well-deserved karma, and it's over so they can go. They all glance backwards one final time to witness Andro's final moments as he is mobbed to death by the villagers. After a bit, Dantalion says that he's tired, and tells the sisters that dinner will need to be next time. They seem sad, but say that's okay and he should rest. One of them says she'll guide them to their lodging, and he asks if one of them is missing. One of the sisters turns around and says it's Beatrice again, and says she has a tendency to wander off. Dantalion notices something, but says it's fine, then says he has an important question for the Burberry sisters. One of the sisters wonders what it is, and we see Beatrice laughing saying that was quite a show, and that next time it will be an even bigger one. At the firm which is in the same city, we see Torkel walking down the hallway, saying tomorrow is the Walpurgis night. And he hasn't been able to contact Ivar for a week now. He gets in front of his door asking if he's inside. Torkel gets no reply, so he opens the door, asking if he's returned yet. But he sees that Ivar isn't in there, and he wonders where he is. Then we hear laughter and see Beatrice up in the window. We hear Ivar's voice coming from her, asking if Torkel has been keeping a proper eye on the firm. Then he jumps from the window, landing in front of a coffin. Torkel asks him where he's been. Ivar says he went to see Lala and Dantalion with his very own eyes, and he observed them really well. Torkel asks if he found anything out. Ivar says no, they never mentioned it, but he did witness something very interesting at Hermes Square. Torkel asks what it was. Ivar laughs and says he underestimated Dantalion. But he's still lost in the struggle of love, which means that his weakness is none other than Lala. He tells Torkel to update him on the situation with Paimon. He tells him that she will support them the best she can. Ivar laughs while getting into a coffin, and says he sees. He smiles, then closes it and a purple aura emanates from it. There are some blue marks in it too that have the number 6, and then Ivar opens it again and is back to being an old man. He says to convey everything he has to say, word for word to Paimon, and it's been hundreds of years since he's looking forward to tomorrow this much. A day after the Andro incident, on the Walpurgis night. We see a plaza, and knights in front of a palace. The first of the demon lords has arrived, and we see a fancy carriage pull up. It stops, and some servants bow. Then we hear Lady Paimon thank them for welcoming her. And she a baddie for real. They all bow to her on the carpet, and she asks one of them if he's finished his arrangements with Ivar. He tells her yes, and it went smoothly. She laughs and looks around, saying she doesn't see any familiar faces here. And she might have been too early. Then a man yells that the next demon lord has arrived. And some oddly drawn horses begin to run up, but run violently, causing the ground to shake. They stop, and the carriage door is kicked open. We hear a girl saying her butt hurts from sitting for too long, and she says it smells like there's a skank here, and she walks out. It is Barbatos. She angrily looks over and starts to growl at Paimon. She says she knew there was a skank here. Paimon says it looks like her taste is as questionable as ever, and Barbatos claps back saying she's heard that she's loose. Paimon asks her if she will act like an adult or not, But of course with her looking like a child she'll have a hard time finding a partner, so she'll remain childish forever. Barbatos says she's ready to brawl right here, then another carriage arrives, and the man tells them to make way for the next demon lord. It jumps to 30 minutes ago, and we see Dantalian's carriage and Lala says she doesn't think she can go in. He asks her what she's talking about, saying being nervous isn't like her. He sighs saying there's a ball before the meeting, and says if she doesn't go he'll be alone, and asks her if that's what she wants. She just stares at him, and he asks her if she's upset about yesterday. He tells her he had no choice but to say what he did, and she blushes. He looks out the window, and she says that it's just that tonight is an event that only demon lords and high-ranking demons can participate in. So for someone like her to set foot here. He asks her why she's still worried, and says that she's officially his fiancée now, so don't be afraid, be confident about how they are the most talked about couple right now, and not to disappoint those looking forward to seeing them. She is still blushing, and wonders what the hell is going on in his head. She thought the lover thing was an excuse to borrow money, and depending on how the meeting goes war could break out, which would affect the lives of thousands of people. The topic is the plague today, but with what happened yesterday it might be brought up too. So how can he remain so calm and collected? They finally arrive, and they both look out the window. She says there are others here. He smiles, then steps out. She tells him to wait, and she'll go first. He sticks his hand out, saying it's fine and they should show off. Then asks if she's ready to go with him. She stares at him for a second, then quickly walks beside him. He says that's cold. Then glares over. Lala tells him there are other lords. And they see Paimon and Barbatos. He says he knows, and starts to walk forward. He bows and greets them both, saying it's nice to meet them, and he introduces himself with a warm smile. Barbatos kindly replies saying to stop talking to her, trash. He says he sees, and apologizes, saying that he's still young, and he's never seen great people such as the two of them. So if he's offended them he would like to apologize. She makes a cringe face, then grits her teeth and walks away saying it's no big deal. Lala is confused. Barbatos thinks about how he isn't scared even with her and Paimon both being here. She smiles saying so this is Dantalian. She laughs while walking past Paimon, who looks at her and says how annoying. She walks up to Dantalian, saying she's heard a lot about him. They have a WWE stare down, and she says the one behind him must be Lapis. Lala kneels and introduces herself. Paimon says she doesn't need to be so formal, and that it's fine. Lala looks up, and Paimon has her fan under her chin, saying her face is very beautiful, and laughs. Dantalian schemes something, then says nobody can compare to Paimon's beauty. Paimon says that's quite a nice thing to say, and says he's handsome himself, and she whispers to him that she'd like to have a long conversation with him, but she'll be seeing them later. They watch her leave, and he laughs saying that was entertaining. And they should go for real. Lala looks pale and he asks her what's wrong. Inside of the palace we see it's full of demons in suits and dresses. Dantalian says this is nice, then asks Lala if she's noticed. She says yes. While they all seem to be indifferent at first glance, they are all looking at them, so there is no running away right now. He laughs in his head, saying he feels like he's trapped in a cage. Now the question is whether they are that much of a spectacle. Saying they are being stared at like they were some rare animals, he compares it to a predator staring at their prey. He asks Lala if the participants are all connected to the firm. She says she doesn't know and only the boss and upper management would know. However, according to the list of participants, about 40% of the participants belong to Lady Paimon. And the other 40% belongs to Barbatos. The last 20% either belong to Lord Marbus, or are unaffiliated. He says he sees, and wonders how many of them are the firm's dogs. Then he says if he were a company, how would he escape? All the lights then shut off. Some people begin to scream saying they can't see anything, and wonder what's going on. In the darkness we see Dantalian, and a blue flame thing appears. Multiple of them are floating above the guests. Dantalian stares at it, and they both look over to the sound of footsteps. Then hear Ivor's voice, welcoming them all saying he wants to greet them, and he holds the honor of presiding over the meeting tonight. And introduces himself to everyone. Dantalian smiles, since he's finally met him. Then confirms with Lala that he is actually Ivar. She says yes, he is the richest demon in the world, and an ancient vampire. And because of Dantalian, she had to betray him, her former employer. He begins to laugh, then covers his mouth saying this is how it'll be. The boss himself has appeared. Ivar chuckles and says he's been waiting for this too. And he stares at Lala across the room, saying despite being a mongrel she outsmarted him, and became the lover of a demon lord. What a horrible woman. He says this is it though, and he will be witnessing her downfall. Ivar shouts, saying that he declares the Walpurgis night opened. Barbatos interrupts him, saying he needs to quit yapping. She chugs her drink, and says she just had a long journey and wants to rest, but it's no fun having an old man being the host. And she needs another drink, she can't stand this. Dantalian laughs and says that Barbatos can do it. Ivar says he understands how she feels, but is interrupted by her asking if he is challenging her. Ivar bows his head, saying not at all. He looks over and Paimon saves him, saying she needs to know her place, and is ashamed of being a part of the same race as her, and Ivar prepared a wonderful place for them. Barbatos drinks more and calls her a skank again, then throws the bottle at her. It breaks in front of Paimon, and she tells her to go home and play with her centaurs. Paimon asks if she's acting like this because she looks like a child, and she seems to have the mind of one too. Paimon says adults understand etiquette, which is something Barbatos will never understand. She starts to get pissed off, telling her it's time to scrap. Paimon laughs, asking if she's angry. Barbatos makes a mean expression, and they both begin to release some of their magical power at one another. Then a man tells them to calm down. They both look over to see who's interrupting them, and the man says that the two of them should just be quiet for a bit. It is the 5th-ranked demon lord Marbas. They both click their tongues and walk away, and Marbas tells Ivar to continue. He says as expected of Marbas, and now all of the necessary people are here. Dantalian's hand begins to shake, and Lala asks what's wrong. Dantalian starts to sweat, but smiles with excitement. As the Walpurgis night has officially been started. If you've watched till the end, comment, turtle, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.